In the sleepy suburban town of Willowbrook Heights, peace and tranquility were paramount, or so the Homeowners Association, HOA, liked to believe. But for Tom Harris, the idea of conformity had always felt suffocating. Tom was a tech enthusiast who spent his weekends experimenting with gadgets, drones being his latest obsession. He had carefully set up his small business, offering aerial photography services, which was a harmless hobby in his eyes. One Saturday morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon and the neighborhood awoke to the familiar chirps of birds, Tom decided it was the perfect time to fly his new drone. He set up in his backyard, away from any roads or nearby homes, and took off. The hum of the drone was barely audible, and it soared above the treetops, capturing beautiful aerial views of Willowbrook Heights. But little did Tom know, the HOA had eyes everywhere, and their biggest watcher had just been awakened. Meet Karen, the HOA queen. Karen Fields was not just a neighbor in Willowbrook Heights. She was the queen of the HOA, having held the title for the last 5 years. She had an eagle eye for anything that disrupted the peaceful image of the community. Lawn decorations, unauthorized paint colors, mailboxes that were too flashy. Nothing escaped her scrutiny. When Karen heard the hum of Tom's drone from across the street, she was immediately on high alert. It wasn't just the noise, though the soft buzzing of the drone did sound like a distant insect invasion. It was the idea of someone in her pristine neighborhood engaging in something unsanctioned. As she watched the drone hover around, her face twisted with disapproval. "That's not allowed," she muttered under her breath. "This is a residential area, not some drone park." Determined to uphold her vision of order, Karen marched over to Tom's front door and rang the bell with a loud, assertive knock. Tom opened it, still holding the controller in his hand. "Is there a problem, Karen?" Tom asked, already sensing the storm coming. "Tom, what is this nonsense?" Karen demanded, pointing at the drone hovering a few feet away. "You can't just fly a drone around here like it's a public park. This is a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Do you know how many complaints I've gotten about that noise?" Tom blinked in surprise. "I'm just flying my drone around my backyard. It's not even that loud, and I'm not bothering anyone." "That's not the point." Karen's face turned red. "It's about the principle. The HOA has rules about outdoor activities, and your drone clearly violates those rules. I'm reporting this immediately." Karen wasted no time. She picked up the phone and immediately called the HOA office to lodge a formal complaint. Within hours, an official letter arrived in Tom's mailbox, outlining the violation of several HOA rules, including no flying of unmanned aircraft and maintaining the sanctity of residential serenity. Tom was stunned. He had never considered his hobby to be a problem, but now it seemed that Karen was making it one. The next week, he received multiple notices, each more threatening than the last, demanding that he cease and desist or face hefty fines. Angered and frustrated, Tom decided to take matters into his own hands. He wasn't about to let Karen and the HOA bully him out of his passion. But what could he do? How could he fight back against this suburban tyranny? Tom had always been a problem solver, and this time, he knew he had to get creative. He couldn't just leave it at letting the HOA win. He thought long and hard about how to get under Karen's skin, and then it hit him. What could possibly annoy her more than her own backyard being disrupted? That's when he came up with his master plan: a hot air balloon. The next morning, as the sun began to rise over Willowbrook Heights, Tom took action. Early enough to avoid detection, he hired a local balloon company to send up a hot air balloon in the early hours, drifting over Karen's house every morning. He made sure to pick a route that would send the balloon floating directly over her property, staying just low enough for her to notice it every single day. The first morning, Karen was immediately roused from her sleep by the giant, colorful balloon drifting above her house. She rushed to her window, face flushed with confusion and disbelief. "What is this?" she shouted. "This is outrageous. I'm calling the HOA again." But by then, Tom had already been on his way back inside, smirking at the unfolding chaos. Over the next few days, the balloon made its appearance promptly every morning, floating gently over Karen's home like an intrusive piece of art in her sky. Karen was losing it. Each time the balloon appeared, she seemed to get more agitated, ranting to her neighbors and anyone who would listen. The HOA tried to intervene, but they quickly realized they were powerless to stop the balloon's gentle course across the morning sky. There was nothing in the HOA rulebook that prohibited a hot air balloon from floating over a property. After all, not one to back down, Karen began her campaign to end Tom's hot air balloon antics. She called the police, the fire department, and even the FAA, claiming that the balloon was a hazard. She even tried to get local news outlets involved to spread her outrage, but no one took her seriously. The police told her there was nothing they could do about a hot air balloon flying over a residential neighborhood. The fire department found no fire risk, and the FAA confirmed that balloons, in this case, were free to fly over private properties as long as they adhered to safety regulations. Tom's revenge was working, and Karen's increasingly frantic calls only made her look more like the villain in the story. The neighbors who had quietly watched this conflict unfold started to take notice. They'd always thought Karen was a little too obsessed with the HOA rules, but now they were witnessing her meltdown firsthand. The balloon continued its daily visits. Tom's business started to boom. People found his antics amusing, and some even reached out for his aerial photography services. The HOA had no legal ground to stand on, and Karen's reputation as the overbearing neighborhood dictator was cemented. As for Karen, her frustration grew to a boiling point, but every time she complained, the community rallied behind Tom, praising him for his creativity and standing up for his rights. Eventually, Karen's reign in the HOA crumbled as more residents got fed up with her heavy-handed approach. The community voted her out of office, and with a triumphant smile, Tom watched as she was replaced by a more relaxed and fair-minded board. In the end, Tom got what he wanted. His drone was safe, his rights respected, and the community had learned that standing up to petty authority could bring about change. Karen, though, learned that sometimes the most peaceful protests are the ones that get under your skin the most. As the days went on, Tom noticed something incredible happening. The balloon was now a tourist attraction. People from nearby neighborhoods were beginning to take photos and videos of the hot air balloon as it floated leisurely over Karen's property. Social media quickly picked up on the spectacle, and soon Tom was getting messages from all over the country, thanking him for his brilliant form of protest. "Tom, this is legendary. Karen is losing her mind." One message read, "Is this an art installation?" Another person joked, "Because it's making my day." Tom had never intended for this to become a viral phenomenon, but the more attention it gathered, the more invested he became. He started to arrange for the balloon to have slightly more extravagant features. The next week, he had it custom painted with a giant, eye-catching design. A cartoonish rendition of Karen's face with the words HOA Queen written across it in bright, bold letters. He called it the Karen balloon. Now, it wasn't just a simple balloon, it was a statement, and Karen, still unaware of the balloon's new face, was growing more irate with each passing day. Despite all the drama unfolding around Karen's public humiliation, the HOA board, now desperate to maintain their semblance of order, convened to figure out what to do. They had tried to reprimand Tom through letters, phone calls, and even more letters, but every time they found themselves hitting a wall of public support for him. This was no longer just an internal neighborhood issue. It had become a community movement. The board tried a new approach. They began sending official notices to all the residents, informing them of a community emergency meeting to address the escalating public nuisance, the hot air balloon. When Tom received his invite, he couldn't help but chuckle. Of course he would show up, and he had a plan. Karen didn't completely disappear from the neighborhood. She just found a quieter way to fight back. She began organizing secret meetings with a handful of like-minded residents who still believed in her rules-first approach to suburban living. Though she was no longer part of the HOA, Karen's desire for control wasn't easily extinguished. One day, while Tom was out flying his drone, Karen got her own idea for revenge. She rented a skywriting plane and had it fly over Tom's house, leaving a message in big, bold letters, "No drones in my sky." And so the peaceful but quirky suburban neighborhood continued on. Tom and his drone were free to roam, and the hot air balloons stayed in the sky, a reminder to all of the hilarious but meaningful battle for freedom, peace, and the right to live with.